What's up, everyone? It's Rayvon from Love Lola, and I am so excited to have been invited to be a guest for Rebecca Page's Sewing Summit of 2023. Today, I am going to be walking you through step by step on how to make my latest pattern, the Jelani. One of the things that I really love about this pattern is that you can really customize it and make it your own when it comes to the handle. So I have chosen to use bamboo for this version that we're going to be making today, but you can totally change the handle for what you're in the mood for. I'm into bamboo right now. I feel like it's going to be really trendy for the summertime, so I'm here for it. But if you like, you can make your handle out of the same material that you make your bag out of. If you don't want to use a lock right here, you can use a snap closure. Another option is you could use a metal connector of some sort for your snap. So for example, for this one, you can see on the top, the flap, I just added a metal strap connector. I added it to my actual flap. If you wanted to, you can add it to the side of the bag. You know, it's up to you. Another option is you can use grommets and place grommets on the top of the flap. And the pattern is going to include some measurements for that for you. And you can put grommets here and then run your chain through it. So there's just a lot of different ways that you can customize this bag and really make it your own. I am so excited to make this bag with you today, and I hope you are too. All right, are y'all ready? Let's go get started. All right, let's go over our interfacing and stabilizing. I've cut out all of my pieces. When you cut them out, go ahead and find the midpoint of each piece. And you can give a little snip with your scissors just so that you can have that marked on the top and the bottom of every piece. It's just gonna make your life a lot easier once we get going sewing everything. Okay, so for my flap, I am interfacing it with SF 101. And that's both pieces. I am using my exterior fabric for both of my flap pieces. If you would like, you can use lining for the underside of your flap, but I just prefer to use my exterior for both. Okay, for my main panel pieces, I am interfacing with Jelani Heavy. This is similar to SF 101, but it's just a little bit sturdier. And I think that it's kind of comparable to Decoville Light. So if you have Decoville Light, you can use that also. If you don't have either one of those, you can still use SF 101. It'll still work just fine. I just like for my bodies on bags like this to have a little bit more structure than usual. And so that's why I like to use the Jelani Heavy for that. Okay, this is my other main panel piece, also interfaced with Jelani Heavy. And then we have our lining piece. Now, as you can see, I am using my vinyl for my lining as well. Again, I like a nice structured bag on bags of this sort. And so I'm using my lining. Know your machine. If I was using my domestic, I probably would not. It depends on the vinyl. You just have to know your machine and you have to know the material that you're using. So if you think your machine can handle it, then I say go for using vinyl for your lining as well. If not, use waterproof canvas. If you don't have waterproof canvas, you can also use cotton. Just make sure that you interface it. So for your lining, if you use waterproof canvas, you do not need to interface it. If you decide to use cotton, then go ahead and interface that with SF 101 and you'll be good. I am not interfacing my vinyl lining because I don't think it needs it. So those are my two inside pieces that are going to be my lining. I've got my gusset piece, my exterior piece. I will be interfacing that with Jelani Heavy as well. I had a moment. And then for my lining, I am going to be interfacing that with SF 101. Now I know I said I wasn't interfacing my main body lining, but for my gusset, I like when I grab a bag like that it doesn't squish in, and that's where that interfacing and the stabilizer comes in. So because of the fact that I don't want my bag to squish in, I'm going to go ahead and interface my gusset part. We have our little flap extender part. I'm going to be interfacing that with SF101, and I'm also going to be sticking a piece of foam in between there. Okay, for stabilizer, I'm going to be using foam because we're going to be quilting, and it just gives a really nice look when you quilt it. This is by Pellon, and I will get the information and include that which one it is, but it is by Pellon. Okay, so for our stabilizing, I'm going to go ahead and grab my flap. If you have a fusible foam, then that's great. I don't, so I'm just going to spray some spray adhesive to get mine put. Okay, so I have my flap where the wrong side is facing up. Okay, and then I am going to find the center the best that I can and just get it centered. Looks pretty good to me. Okay, get that pressed on. Okay, and now I'm going to repeat that to my 2 main panel pieces. All right, and once we have those on, we're gonna grab our interfacing pieces, and we're gonna make sure that it is where the fusible side is facing down, and we're just gonna lay it right on top. Okay. Grab my flap. Now I'm gonna head over to my heat press and get all of these fused together. And while I'm over there, I'm gonna go ahead and fuse my interfacing on my other pieces. Really quick, for our little piece, I am going to interface it, but I'm not going to include my stabilizer yet. I'm gonna wait until we sew this, and then we're gonna just insert it in. So right now, we're only adding interfacing to our little piece that sticks out. Once you have your pieces interfaced and stabilized, go ahead and grab your pattern pieces and use that to get all of the placements for your hardware marked. Okay, let's mark the lines for our quilting. Grab a erasable marker. I'm going to be using this. I got it from Amazon. Grab an erasable marker. I'm going to be using this one. I got it off of Amazon. Now, if you feel comfortable marking on the front of your vinyl, then go for it. I don't, especially since I'm using white. So I will be marking on the back of my vinyl and stitching from the back. So I start by placing my ruler right at that midpoint that we made earlier, and I just bring it to the corner. And draw a line. Then I do the same thing from that mid corner to the other bottom corner. Now you can make your quilting as big or as small as you like. I'm going to be doing mine at 1.5 inch. For reference, this is one that I did, and this is at 1.5 inch. And I like that size. Not too big, not too small. But by all means, you know, do you. All right, so once we have our first line, you're going to place your ruler line at 1.5 inch. So this ruler is 3.5 inches long. So right here is 1/2 inch, and that's 1 inch. So I'm gonna mark where it's 1 inch right on top of the line that I just made. There, I'm just going to draw my next line. And then I'm going to repeat it. 1.5 inch down from there. And we're just gonna keep doing that until we are finished. All right, once we have got all of our pieces marked, it's time for the fun part. Let's go and get our lines quilted on. And today I will be sewing on my Yamata 1341. It is an industrial machine, and it does have a cylinder arm. That's my... Okay, so whenever I'm sewing pieces like this, I try to sew them in a continuous motion to make it be a little bit faster. But I do want to note that we do need to backstitch at the beginning and the end of each line if you're starting a new line. If you choose to cross over, then you don't have to backstitch, obviously, because you're going to be just continuing that stitch. So let's just get started and see if it makes sense. I like to start in the middle. On my industrial, I have my stitch length at about a 4. If I was on my domestic, that would be about a 2.5 or a 3. I don't like to do big stitches when I do quilting personally. Okay, so we're gonna get started. And we're just gonna kind of guide it along. Now what I like to do is, of course, I'm going to back stitch, and then I like to grab my next piece of material and keep going. Now when you do your front and back stitch, you only want to do that a couple of stitches, because I did allow a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. I like to do 1/4 inch, but because of the quilting, I wanted to add a little bit more so that we don't see any of those back stitching. But so just be careful. Don't stop paying attention and do, you know, 5-6 stitches in back stitch, because then you're going to see that on the front, that back stitch, and you don't want that. I'm going to grab my next piece. Okay, and then I'm just going to grab that first one. I like to rotate personally. I like to start from the middle, and then I just start rotating in and out. I don't like to go from one end to the other because I feel like it kind of pushes it to the side. Just my personal preference. Now, really quick, I'm going to show you another option. If you want, what you could do is when you get to the end of here. All right, as much as I know you want to sit there and watch me quilt this whole thing, for the sake of my battery, I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera off, and then I will meet you in just a second when we're ready to go to the next part. All right, once we're done quilting, we can move on to the next step. Are you done quilting? Are you sure? Because what you don't want to happen is to get 3 or 4 steps ahead and realize that you forgot one of your lines of stitching. Ask me how I know. I did it on my last bag. So yeah, take the time to go through and just check each line and make sure that you didn't forget one, because when you're doing a lot of them, you know, in a row, it's easy to overlook. So just give it another check, and once you are positive that you have everything covered, then let's move on to the next step. So what I want you to do is grab your outer gusset piece and one of your main panel pieces. You want your main panel piece to be right side facing up, and we are going to be getting our gusset connected. So your material is going to be right sides facing each other. This is the bottom of my main panel. I'm going to go ahead and rotate it because it's just a little bit easier for me to get my clamps on that way. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get our gusset attached. So this is the bottom of my main panel. I'm going to go ahead and rotate it because it's just easier for me to get the gusset attached that way. So my main panel is right side facing up. My gusset is right side facing down. So correct sides are touching, or the exterior of each side is touching. We want to go ahead and match up those midpoints that we marked earlier. Okay, so we're going to line up those midpoints that we made earlier. And we're going to go ahead and pin the bottom middle, and then we're going to grab one of our ends of the gusset and line it up with the corner and pin that. I like to pin at the other end of the gusset as well, just to make sure that it doesn't move and shift. Go ahead and line up the other edge. Okay, and now we're just going to pin all the way around, starting at the top and then from the inside, working out to the corners. You know what I like to do? Actually, let's do this. Corners they can get a little tricky sometimes. And I hate when I get my corner nice and pinned, and then what happens when we go and sew it? It starts shifting and moving and just messing everything up. So what I like to do when I am just really intense about my curve looking great is I'll put a little piece of double-sided tape just along the corner, and that will stop that shifting from happening. Just along the corner. Okay, now let's get it attached again. And yeah, I'm still gonna clamp on top of the tape because I don't trust it. I don't trust it. My corners just give me the worst time, so I'm gonna do all that I can. There we go, that feels good. Tape it, clip it. staple it. If I didn't hate taking staples out so much, I would, but no, this would be fine. All right, now we're going to head to the machine and we're going to sew around this at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, now once I got that attached, I went ahead and made a second stitch right on the outside of the first one because we're dealing with that quilting. I just want to have an extra kind of reinforcement to help eliminate that thread from, you know, unraveling. Okay, and once you've done that, oh, how pretty is this? I don't know what it is about quilting, but it just makes your bag look so expensive, right? It just looks so fancy. Ooh. You made little lines over and over. That means it's expensive. Okay, so let's grab our other main panel piece. Okay, and this is the bottom. We're gonna flip it around to make it easier. And right sides are touching again. So the correct side, the exterior of the main panel is touching the exterior of the gusset. And we're going to do the same thing as before. Match up our mid pieces first. Match up our edges. So here's a quick tip. Whenever you're doing your corners, you always want to start pinning on the outside. Like I mentioned earlier, you pin the corners and the middle, and then you work yourself to the corner. And then when you get to that corner, if you happen to have just a little bit of fabric left over, you see how there's just a little bit sticking out? You don't want to force it because then you're going to have all that wonkiness on the outside of your bag. So fit as much as you can in, and then the little bit that's left over like that, can you see that? You can just cut it off. Ta-da! And now it's gonna be good to go when you sew it. Okay, so let's get this attached. I am using my cool top stitching table from Recent Relic Designs. I love it so much. It helps me keep my seams nice and straight. Okay, so I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but whenever I'm adding a gusset onto a panel, usually I like to sew it with the panel facing the sewing machine and the gusset part facing up, as opposed to, say, why am I confused? Opposed to this. You know, the gusset could be facing down and this main panel up. For whatever reason, I feel like it just works a little bit better when the gusset part is facing up. So, back to like that. All right, and we're at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. When I get to the corners, I hope you can see this. This piece right here, what I like to do is just kind of squeeze it in the middle and then push down. And when you do that, it makes like a kind of like a little V. Oh, it's kind of a V right there. So I pinch it in the corner and then push down and it makes like that V shape. And then I hold it there while I work, while I sew over that curve, and that helps me, in my opinion, keep that from being too wonky in the corner. It'd be like a nice little pleat. Yeah, it's like we're making a pleat. Okay? And just take your time on those curves. There's no need to rush. We ain't going nowhere. I got you for the next, what, 30, 45 minutes? So take your time. I go stitch by stitch. Ain't no shame in my game. I take my time. because I want my corner to look as good as possible. So, you know, there's no prize if we rush. We don't get anything for getting it done faster. So take your time, baby. All right. Okay, so working on our lining, we're going to attach it the same way that we did our exterior. So I've gone ahead and pinned it just like before. The only difference is when we sew this together, we're going to increase our seam allowance about 1 inch down. After we get started, we're going to increase it from 3/8 of an inch seam allowance to about 5/8 of a seam allowance. And the reason we do that is so that, you know, have you ever looked inside of a bag and the lining, or have you ever made a bag and the lining is kind of droopy or there's too much material inside? Well, a way to decrease the chance of that happening is to increase your seam allowance, and that way it'll be a little bit tighter on the inside and you won't have that saggy lining that we all hate. Okay, so we're starting at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. We're going to sew for about 1 inch, and now we're going to gradually increase that seam allowance. I'm going to move my top stitch out of the way so that I can increase it. Okay, and once we start getting closer to the edge, about 3 inches down, I'm going to slowly start veering back in, because I want to make sure by the time I get to 1 inch from the edge that I'm back at that 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, because this is going to be a drop-in lining, and so you need your seam allowance to be exactly what they should be, or it's not going to match. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get my table moved back in place. And there we go. We're back to 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Perfect. All right, now go ahead and repeat that to the other side of your lining. Once your main panels are done, you can go ahead and trim down your seam allowance to about 1/8 of an inch, but make sure on the top corners that you leave that a little bit longer. You want to leave that because when we sew this later, we want to be able to open those seams, so we don't want to trim that down. So trim down around it, but leave the corners on all of your panel pieces longer on the corners. Okay, let's work on our flap. The thing I love about this pattern is that you can do a lot of different things with this little flap extension piece. So if you wanted to do a snap closure on the snap, you can do that, and you can just insert some magnetic snaps. I'm going to be doing a turn lock on mine, but if you were doing magnetic snaps, then you would need to go ahead and use that mark and get those installed before this next step. Okay, but I'm not doing that, so I'm gonna wait on my hardware installation. So right now what I'm gonna do is take my 2 pieces and place them right sides together, matching them up at the midpoint. And then I'm gonna go and get these connected. Now when I sew something like a curve, I like to make my stitch length a little bit shorter because I feel like it helps the curve look smooth, if that makes sense. Once you turn it out, you know how sometimes it can look a little choppy around the curves? I find when I use a smaller stitch length, it helps with that being a little bit smoother. So Right now I'm going to go over to my machine and I'm going to stitch from here to here, and I'm going to be doing that at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance on the wrong side. Okay, so I've got this sewn together at 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to trim it down to about 1/8 of an inch. And we're going to turn it out. Push it out gently. To try to get my seams smooth. I'm just going to poke my seam ripper through, and then I'm going to make a mark so I can know where that placement is supposed to be. Right there. All right. Now grab your little stabilizer piece and go ahead and stick it in. And now we're going to go over to the machine and we're going to baste right across the top to close this up at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, grab the lining or the underside of your flap, the side that is not quilted, and you're going to turn it so that it's wrong side up. If you have not marked your snap placement yet, go ahead and do so. Okay. Now we're going to grab our magnetic snaps. You'll see that it comes with one side is going to be flat and kind of concave in a little bit in the middle. That's your female. And the other side is going to go out just a little bit. That's the male. We want to install the male right now. So we're going to use our washers to get that marked. I do like to use a little bit of Peltex 70. It's Pel on Peltex. As a little bit of extra reinforcement behind my hardware. Now if you like, you can grab some SF101 or some kind of interfacing and fuse over that metal. I'm not concerned about it because this is going to be joined with this, and so we're going to have that protective foam so that it's not going to be rubbing against anything, so I think it's fine. Okay, so take your flat piece that we just worked on and we're going to rotate it so that the bottom side is facing towards the top. And then we're going to grab a little flap extension piece. I've placed a piece of double-sided tape on it. Now, I'm installing a turn lock, so it doesn't matter which side I connect this on. If you did a magnetic snap, right now, your magnetic snap should be facing down towards the flap so that when it flips out, it's going to be on the same side as that. Does that make sense? If you added a label to this piece, right now your label piece should be facing up so that when this gets extended, it will be on the opposite side, so the same side as the exterior of the flap. Sum that up really quick. If you did a magnetic snap in the middle, right now it should not be showing, it should be facing down. If you did a label tag, right now that label tag should be showing, it should be facing up. If you're doing a turn lock, it doesn't matter because you're going to be going through the whole thing. Okay, so use some double-sided tape. And then you want to find your midpoint and match it up with the midpoint of this flap. And attach. put another piece of double-sided tape and then take your exterior flat piece, okay, and you want the curved piece, the bottom, to be facing towards the top, and you want it right side facing down. Find your midpoint and get that connected. Ignore that. I almost put my magnetic snaps on the wrong side. Don't be like me, okay? And now we're going to clamp around the entire thing. So you're gonna notice that the side that's quilted is gonna be just a slightly bit smaller all the way around than the other piece. And that's because we quilted it. So when we do that, it kind of draws it up a little bit. Go ahead and use the piece that is not quilted for your seam allowance. So I don't want you to go and trim it down to equal this. No, leave it the way it is and use the larger flat piece as your guide for your seam allowance. And we're gonna be sewing this at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, let's trim it down to about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And when I get to that, you can feel when you get to the part where that mid little extension piece is, don't trim that. We're gonna leave that the way it is. Okay, and when you sew your flap, go ahead and just like before, sew a second line right outside of the first one, just so we can reinforce this thread. We don't want it to unravel. Okay, and now we can turn this out. Y'all, we're almost finished. Okay, gently get those the corner curves pushed out. If you have a tool, you can use it. So let's grab our main panel, and we're gonna go ahead and turn that right side out as well. Oh, I love it. I like to go ahead and squeeze all of my seams just to kind of get the seams, the thread to relax a little bit. Looking good. Let's go and baste the top of this flap closed really fast. Okay, once you have that basted, go ahead and grab your main panel, and you want your back side of your main panel to be facing up. Grab your flap, and you want the top of it, the quilted side, to be facing down. Match up your mid pieces. And let's go and connect these at 1/8. I'm sorry, yes, at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so I have marked where all of my hardware is gonna go. I'm gonna go ahead and get that installed really quick. Try your best not to cut where you have a stitch. We don't want to cut any thread, so. And I did go ahead and install my label on the back. I did it right in the middle of that front, of that middle triangle. You can install yours wherever you like. Okay, so now we're going to grab our lining piece. So our bag is right side facing out, and our lining is inside out. You're going to place the side of your main panel bag that has the flap on it towards the back of your lining, just in case you did a zipper pocket or something inside, and it matters what side is the front and the back. And you're gonna just place your exterior piece inside of your lining. It's gonna be a little difficult. You're gonna have to really scrunch your bag up, but it's okay. Do what you gotta do to get it in there. Now, on your front piece, go ahead and mark about 7.5, 8 inches. And we're gonna leave that open. Okay, I'm gonna put an X so I can know to stop right there. So we're gonna match up our mid pieces on the lining and the bag and the front and the back. Smush it in there, it's okay. And then we're gonna match up our gusset pieces. And when you match that up, go ahead and open up those seams, just like that. All right, and once we get it clamped, we're gonna go and sew it together at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, making sure that you stop at those X's in the front, okay? Because that's how we're gonna turn the bag out. Make sure that you top stitch, that you back stitch really well at those marks too, because you know we're gonna be pulling the bag through it. So we're almost done. Are you excited? I am. All right, let's go do it. Starting at the X, around, and stopping at this X. One thing I will say that I absolutely love about my cylinder arm is when it comes to attaching bags like this. It's so convenient to have this open area for my bag to hang over instead of having to smush it, you know, on a flatbed. So just thought I'd show this process to anyone who's interested maybe or thinking about getting an industrial. Okay, I'm gonna start at that X that I made. Oopsie. If you have to smush your bag a little bit, smush it. It'll be okay. Or we'll straighten it up later. Okay, so we have got our exterior connected to our interior. So let's gently turn this out through the opening that we left. Be gentle. The thing that I love about this bag is that there are so many ways that you can do your handle. So let's go over a few options. So this other bag that I did, I used this type of hardware. And all I did was take it and insert it over the flap instructions. That's an option that you can do. And I just placed it right there in the middle of the flap. You don't need measurements for that. Just, you know, kind of place it where you think it needs to be. That's one option. Another option is that you can use the measurements that I provided on the pattern and you can do grommets. Okay, and then you can take a chain and run it through underneath the flap and back up on top. Another option is that you can actually sew your own strap to be used as a handle. You would need to make a strap that is 11 3/4 inches long by 1 inch. And to make that, You're gonna cut a piece of fabric, 11 3/4 inch. I'm just using this for reference. And what you wanna do is draw a line down the center. And then you're going to fold in to that line, both sides. And then you're gonna fold it one more time. But when you fold into that line, don't fold all the way up to that line. Leave a little bit of a space, because if you fold it all the way up, your handle may tend to wanna twist a little bit. So you're gonna fold almost up to that line and fold it again, just like you would make a traditional strap. And then once you do that, you would sew around the entire thing at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. If you're like me, I don't like my straps to be flimsy, my handles to be flimsy, so I always like to add a little bit of extra stabilizer. If you would like to do that, what I do is I measure down 1 inch and I draw a second line. Then I take a piece of Pelon Peltex 70 and I'll cut it the length of the handle by 1/2 of an inch. And then I would take this and I would use some sort of spray adhesive, or I would just place some interfacing over it like we did earlier when we stabilized our bag. But I would place this right in the middle of that line, you know, spray adhesive it down, or I recommend placing interfacing over it, because regardless if you use stabilizer or not on your handle, you're going to need to interface it. So place your interfacing over it, and then we're gonna do the same thing, bend it in towards that halfway mark, bend the other side in, and fold it over. And then what this is gonna do is give you a little bit more of a stiffer handle so that it's not just all wonky and moving when you grab it. Now, if you wanna live on the edge, you can add another piece of this on the opposite side. So draw another line and then place another piece in between. And that way it'll be really, really stiff. It doesn't move at all. I've done that before too. So it's just your preference. And once you get that done, what you would do is measure in about 1/4 of an inch and place that handle right in the middle or towards the back, however you want to place it. It's really, you know, your preference. And then I would use a rivet to attach it. And that would be about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch from the edge of this handle. Then I would grab one of these triangle rings and place it on the opposite end of the handle. Run it through. And then I would just get it as close to that rivet as possible. Then I would grab my second rivet and place it on the other side. Okay. From there, you would grab your other triangular ring, place it on, and basically you're going to repeat the same thing for this side. Once you get it on, place this at the same amount of distance from the side as the other one, rivet it on one side, scoot that over as much as you can, and rivet on the other side. And then you'll have your fabric handle attached. You can adjust the length of the handle if you want it to be smaller, if you want it to be longer, that's up to you. And then you'll have this available for you to add your swivel hook for your chain or for your strap if you make one, okay? Super easy. Another option for the handle. I am going to be using a bamboo handle for my bag today just because, I don't know, I've just really been into bamboo lately, and so I went ahead and got some bamboo handles, and that's what I'm using. I'm gonna attach my handle last because it just makes sense. We still have to top stitch this bag, and I don't want this to be in the way at the machine. even though we marked it, I like to wait until I'm at this point, and I'll grab some waterproof canvas or just some kind of fabric and go ahead and stick it inside. And then I'll gently bring my flap over and see about where I want it to land. Because, try as we might, following instructions, sometimes our seam allowance get off a little bit, things happen. And so I like to just go ahead and have a look at it myself before I start punching, where I'm going to be adding my placements. I want this to be right in the center. So I'm going to mark it there. And then these two pieces on the outside look pretty great. So I'm going to mark that. Okay, so let's go ahead and get the part of our turn lock that's going to be going on our main panel attached. So just take your bag and push down on your flap extension and find the center or where you want to place your turn lock, and then lift up and find it on your bag. I have it marked at the center point, and now I'm going to place my turn lock right over that mark. You know what's really cool about quilting? You kind of have your everything set up for where you need to make your marks. Like, put it in the middle of that triangle. We're good to go. I'm gonna rip it. Now make sure when you do this that you are not ripping, you're not grabbing your lining. This is only gonna be the exterior of your bag, okay? Okay, okay, there we go. Now, really quick, let's talk about stabilizing. I know, I keep bringing it back up, right? That's because it's important. Okay, so this is the point where I like to add my stabilizer on a bag like this. I have my Peltex cut out in the gusset and also in two main panels. But I want to say this, if you ever find yourself without Peltex or whatever stabilizer you're using, you can make do with what you have. For example, I have some leather. I started purchasing leather remnants because it's very affordable. I was new to leather making, so I didn't want to spend a lot of money on expensive leather, so I would pay, $5, $10, $15 for remnants to come in just so I can get used and familiar with sewing on leather. With that being said, I have quite a bit of leather remnants hanging around, and some of the colors I don't care for because when you order the remnants, you don't really get to pick what you get. So I have some colors I don't care for, or some that have marks that I don't want to use because I don't like the way it looks. So what I've started doing is those pieces that have been hanging around for a year or two, I'll use them as stabilizers because they're very thick, and they have a nice feel to them. So also vinyl, I buy vinyl so much, especially when I first started, I had a problem. So I have rolls and rolls of vinyls that as I became more developed in bag making, I don't feel like they're good enough quality for me to make a bag with, and they're just hanging around taking up space. So I'll cut those up and use them as stabilizers as well. So, get creative with it, use what you have in the house, save yourself some money. So with that being said, let's get our stabilizer done. Get yourself some Peltex, get yourself some old vinyl, some old leather, whatever you want to do, but let's make this bag have some structure. That's what stabilizer is for. So I'm gonna reach in and I'm just gonna insert this and lay it across the back of my bag. Just gonna open it up, lay it in there. Now, if you want to use some kind of adhesive when you put this in there, you can. I don't because I don't think it needs it. I find when I add stabilizer to my bags like this, it doesn't shift around. Once you get that lining on top of it and get everything sewn up, it generally wants to stay where you put it. But there is nothing wrong with adding some adhesive. You can do spray adhesive, which I'm gonna do. If I can spray it. Don't act funny now. think I need to clean my top. Okay. Or you can use Beacon 3-in-1 glue. Any kind of like fabric, adhesive glue, anything like that will work. So we're gonna place that in and get it centered. Press it down a little bit. Make sure that it sticks. Feels good. Feels good. Okay. Now I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. Actually, next I'm going to add my gusset stabilizer. Okay. So I just take my gusset stabilizer and I just kind of fold it in half. Find my mid piece and then I start there. So I'm gonna just insert it. I'm just gonna eyeball it and see about where the center is. Got it. I'm going to push it down and then just slowly push it out until I get to the top edge. You want to get it right in between those seams. Make sure that you feel it and you get it right between those seams. You know, you don't want some of the gusset hanging over the front or over the back because then it's not going to give you that crisp, you know, corner that you're looking for. You see the difference already from the side that has the stabilizer and the side that doesn't? If you haven't been using stabilizer on your bags, you've been missing out. It just really gives a nice structure. You know, it takes your bag from looking handmade or, you know, homemade, I guess should be the word, not handmade, homemade, to looking like, oh my goodness, like that bag looks like it can be in a boutique. Like that looks like it could be in a store. And that's what we want, right? Or that's what I want. I don't want people to look at my bag and think, oh yeah, somebody made that. She made that in her bedroom. No, I want them to look at it and be like, oh, I wonder what store they got that from. But that's just me, you know. We all have our own vices. Okay, once you're happy with your stabilizing, you can go ahead and get your lining pushed in. There we go. Oh my gosh, I love it. Okay. Now, you may notice where the gusset meets right here on both sides that you have a lot of material going on. If you're like, oh my goodness, that feels so thick, I'm nervous, my machine isn't gonna be able to handle it, you can go in and just trim down that seam allowance that's on the gusset. Okay? You can trim that down to right where it meets at that intersection. Another thing that I like to do is I like to hammer down my seams. Now, I will say, do this at your own discretion because not all vinyl is created equal. It can damage it. So just, if you're gonna try it, start off very gently and see how it responds. And also, I recommend putting a piece of fabric between the hammer and your bag just to kind of make sure that you're not gonna leave a mark or anything like that. Okay? And that will definitely help get the seams a little bit smoother. Do you see the difference between what I just did right there and right here? Okay, so we're gonna go around and just kind of massage our seams to get them, you know, flat and aligned and everything. We're just massaging it to open those seams up just a little bit. Okay. Okay, and now we're going to just take this front piece that we left open, and if you gently pull inside those seams, it's going to make the fabric naturally want to turn in. Going to use the side. What I like to do is line up my mid piece, both pieces about where I think it should bend, and pin it. And then I'll go to my outside and work my way in from the outside to the middle, making sure that the line stays flush across here. We don't want it to get, you know, lopsided. We want to make sure that we keep our seams here the same as the seams in there. So just take your time and make sure that this is straight, okay? You don't want to rush it because you don't want to make this gorgeous bag and then you look at the front of it and it's all wonky. You want this to be as flush as possible. Okay, and now we're going to pin around the entire thing because we want to make sure that everything's even when we go and do our final top stitch. We're not going to pin this because the flap is going to be standing up like this when we sew that top stitch, so no need to pin it. All right, here we go. We're almost done, y'all. Okay, so let's go ahead and get this top stitched. And we're going to be top stitching this at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to start on one of my side gussets. Right in the middle. Did I mention we're going to be doing this at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance? A top stitch. I have my stitch length at about 4.5. Before you do this, make sure that you have everything added that you need. All of your magnetic snaps, your turn lock on the front of your bag should be added. If you have a bag label, that should be added as well, okay? If I didn't mention, I did back stitch at the beginning of this bag. Okay, I'm back at the end, so I'm going to do a couple of back stitches there. If you don't want to back stitch, you can leave your thread long and not back stitch and cut it. And then what you would do is take a needle and run this thread up through your last stitch, up through the top of the bag, and then you can tie it in a knot and cut it and burn it. That's an option. Okay, next let's get the top part of our turn lock attached. And now I'm going to use this to mark my hole. Make sure that it's centered and even. Okay, now let's get our handle attached. Today I am going to be using this bamboo handle with these feet because I just think it's really nice next to this white. I'm obsessed. So I have marked where I need to make my holes, and I just based it off of where the holes are on my hardware. So just depending on what hardware you use, you know, figure out those measurements. Look at this handle, how cute it is too. Oh my gosh. I am so into handles lately because it just makes your bag look so professional when you have, you know, some hardware or something like that instead of just a sewn handle, in my opinion. So I'm just really digging it lately. All right, and there we go. Oh my goodness. I am in love with this bag. Okay. And if you want to add a chain, then you can just add it right on the back